Right, hello and welcome to the second episode of the Panachecast. I'm Peter Davis and I'm here with my co-host Neil Pemberton.
Hi Pete, nice to see you again.
Yep. And every Monday we're going to take you through the best LegalTech news stories or those that we think you'll find of interest from the previous week. We're going to cover a few events that are up and coming so that you can get out there and meet with others. And we're going to take a potential deeper dive into sort of a general topic of the show that we've put together. You can find us at the Panache Software YouTube page, and we're also now on Spotify and on the Apple iTunes podcast app as well.
Absolutely. So this week, the topic of the show is things that you should consider before you go out and invest in legal technology and what you should be looking for. We've got a few news stories this week to feed into that. The main story of which is a report by Clyde & Co. called The Looking Glass, which is a very interesting read and give a lot of statistics on what people are thinking about and how comfortable they are looking in this area. We'll cover that in a bit more detail. We're also going to be looking at the SRA's rules on transparency. Not so new now, they came out in December, but they've just recently published their reminder that they are coming down on people.
You should be following these rules by now.
Rules. It's not, they're not recommendations, they're rules. So we'll be covering that in a bit more detail as well. And then finally, we're going to be looking at 10 things you should consider before you procure AI solutions. We talked about AI a bit last week, even though we ran a bit longer than we intended perhaps. We want to try and keep this down to about 45 minutes. There's still a lot we can talk about on AI, so we'll probably cover that in a bit more detail this week and maybe a bit beyond, but that's the first news story this week, and if anyone wants to read it, it's available within the Law Society guidance. The notes and the links and everything you need will be in the show notes after we've published this. But the author of the report is Rafi Faruq of Genie AI, who has put quite a long list of things together to consider before you go off and buy an artificial intelligence solution. I think there are 10 items in there. We just want to touch on a couple of them. Most interestingly for me was security and implementation. So what should we be looking for in that respect, Pete?
Yeah, so it's an interesting topic because a lot of the things that he covers in there about procuring legal AI are things you should look at when you're procuring any type of legal technology nowadays. And as I said, the key factors that we found in there, which are kind of more general and related to all AI, is security is a big issue now. Yeah. And he covers in there regarding whether you're going for hosted solutions, whether it's going to be an on-premise solution, whether it's going to be a cloud solution. What are the different avenues you can go down, and that's quite pressing now. With a lot of software now, people are more and more looking to have shared hosted solutions. They're cheaper for the software organizations to create, much more easier for them to maintain as well. But of course, you're sharing a platform with others. And I know that can be a big issue. We've discussed it before in law firms, where even having your database sat on the same server as another customer's database can be an issue to law firms. So alternatives to that, and as he publicises in here as well, is quite often people are now going for managed cloud solutions. And this is where, again, you might have a hosted solution in the cloud, hosted on something like Azure, Microsoft's Azure system, even Amazon's AWS system. But it's actually a private cloud instance, so only your organization has access to that. So it may be behind a VPN. It's not public facing, it's not open to the world.
Can Amazon and Microsoft look into what's in there, or is it private from them? How do they deal with that?
Well, the software resides on their servers, so there's always that implication, but it's effectively, because it's behind a VPN, it's effectively maintained by the provider you've gone with, and and yourselves, really. So fundamentally, you're the only ones that have access to it. It's not publicly facing to the world.
Yeah.
There's always potential, and there probably is in these situations. And as we discussed last week in the AI instance, that because these things reside on Microsoft's systems, and they're ultimately responsible for the maintenance of those and the system admin of those, then potentially there are aspects that they do have access to. But of course that then becomes on the solution provider. Are they encrypting the data in its transmission and encrypting the data at rest in the system?
Okay.
So is the data in the database encrypted?
Yes.
If it is, it's really not an issue that the service provider also has access, because even if they could look at the database, you can't get access to that data.
Yeah, sure.
So there's trade-offs as anything. You can either look to have it hidden behind your own firewall, or you're looking at hosting somewhere. I would suggest that the benefits of having it hosted by someone else in something like Azure actually outweigh some of those issues. You don't have to worry about it in your IT department then maintaining these things.
So the problems then for firms, if they have their own solution in-house or on-premise, is that they have to come up with the money to buy where information is stored, the new servers and so on.
Spin those up.
But you then also can't scale it if you want to grow quickly as easily as you could by just relying on someone like Amazon or Microsoft to send you a bill every month for how much usage you have.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, and not only will they just send you that bill, this is what the stuff you've used, you're not having to pay for their IT support and pay to have someone in your organization looking after the servers. But also what you have to consider is these organizations, Amazon, Google and Microsoft, are investing billions in their data centers and in this infrastructure as a service. So they are investing far more than your organization could ever implement in IT spend. So they're investing that in security, they're investing it in the actual systems that they can spin up.
Do you think it's fair to say as well that probably most of the startups that we've spoken to in the past will be hoping to deploy their solutions on a cloud-based in a cloud-based way, rather than coming to install, or however you would deal with putting something on a system in premise?
I would suggest that, and it's due to the trend in the industry now, is that most people are looking for subscription-based services, software as a subscription, that kind of thing, because the cost to you as a firm are so much smaller. You're not having to worry about the infrastructure, and from the point of view of the startups and the companies that are providing the software, it also makes sense to them. They don't have to worry about maintaining a solution running at multiple different locations, and all that entails. They've basically got one solution that they maintain, which they update and upgrade. So it's easier maintenance for them. You've got the overhead and the slight headache of you're managing someone else's data. But for startups, I think I'd be surprised if many are not looking at these kind of subscription services. That seems to be the norm now. But of course, with all of these, a lot of them will run on premise as well.
Sure.
We've looked at solutions that run in sort of the Azure Service Fabric and things like that. Those can be run by an organization on site if you wanted to.
So they have the choice.
Yeah, so you're not cut out with those kind of things.
No. You mentioned easier maintenance, presumably also easier implementation for law firms as well.
Well, I mean, the implementation is normally easier in those instances because you're not having to spin up your own servers. You're not having to buy in server infrastructure or virtual environments. You're not having to stand up your IT teams to put that in place and worry about then your backup strategies, your disaster recovery strategies, all that kind of stuff. You're just given access to a built solution somewhere to use. So, I think
more pros than cons.
More pros than cons, and that's one of the main things from this. There's lots of other aspects about that Rafi goes into about procuring AI. But as I said, a lot of those are issues that affect all forms of technology now, all forms of solutions. So this is one of the key ones. Where is it going to be hosted? And the industry is pushing more and more to externally hosted solutions. And it's just to say that, with the private sort of the private cloud implementations that you can have, you don't lose all of the security of having it sitting in one of your servers on site.
Yeah. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
But anyone who's gone through the process of implementing something new, then do reach out to us. Let us know how that went. We'd be really interested to hear from you, and the good and the bad, and what you're using now. And if you have any reservations about moving on to a cloud-based solution, then let us know what the reservations are.
Yeah. What's the appetite in your organisation from the decision makers there? Do they feel comfortable in moving stuff into the cloud or not?
Yeah, definitely. So the more detail on that available in the show notes. Have a look at that link. We'll link to it in the show notes for the Law Society's report on that.
Yeah.
What's item 2 on the list then?
So second up, and this on the face of it doesn't necessarily look too much like a legal technology issue, but I think it definitely factors into that, is as we mentioned before, the price transparency rules that have come out of the SRA, the Solicitors Regulation Authority. So these are, let me read you some of it. So in its March update, the SRA reminded us that the price transparency rules came into force, and this is relevant to firms providing services in the following areas: residential conveyancing, uncontested probate, debt recovery up to 100k, employment tribunals, etc. And it set out some rules that firms must make prices clear and easy to understand, provide price based on a typical case, and if not based on an average range, explain the basis of fees, whether they're hourly, whether they're fixed rate, likely disbursements, that kind of thing. So just making it clear what you're going to be charging.
Yeah.
So for me, this doesn't necessarily look like a technology related issue, but one of the key things for me, what does this mean for law firms? But more importantly, do they have access to that kind of information to put it out there to people?
Yeah, sure. Obviously the answer will depend on which firm you're at, I suspect. And what's interesting about that list is that they are typically the services that firms might provide to individuals rather than to corporates. So residential conveyancing, uncontested probate, debt recovery, small amounts of debt recovery, although £100,000 might not seem small. But
not to everyone.
Not to everyone. But by and large, those are the services to individuals. So that's probably why there's a transparency requirement. And I suspect that individuals haven't seen the benefits of technology, and the firms delivering those are probably more likely to be high street firms than the bigger firms. Now, there are lots of firms that are very good at doing high volume, and if anyone's, I may have mentioned this before, if anyone's ever remortgaged with NatWest, you'll know that you don't speak to the lawyer that NatWest uses. They just they email everything to you with links to a data room, and you fill everything in and scan it back. Now, what's interesting is access to the information that will help lawyers do this, I think, is probably not readily available in the smaller firms. I might be wrong. But if you've ever worked with somebody, say you're asking for 2 quotes, and suppose you're asking a builder for 2 quotes, to use another industry. If you have a builder that comes out and says, I've got lots of experience in these jobs, these are all the things that tend to go wrong, and he lists everything out for you, make several assumptions about what the job entails, you probably, even if it comes in more expensive, you probably feel more comfortable with that, because it's clear and it's transparent, versus someone who is somewhat of a finger in the air. This is what I think it's going to cost. You're less comfortable. So that's the reason why, presumably. But knowing where things have gone wrong in the past, and being able to sort of identify the bits that go smoothly, the bits that don't go smoothly, how long they take, and all that experience, that is in a lot of people's heads and isn't down on paper anywhere. So getting that information onto a system somewhere where it can be drawn out, it will be critical, I think, for people. Yeah,
I mean, definitely. I mean, I guess from your point of view, one of the prime things that you as a lawyer have to do is your recording your time.
That's right.
Things like that. But of course, I guess that shows, unless you've got anything in place to analyse that, all it's showing is at the end of the month you billed X amount of hours to a client. It's not going to tell you what type of job you were doing for them, where the delays were in that job, what bits took the most time, what bits went through smoothly, and how that compares to previous runs of that work. So I think that's where we're getting at with this, is that you can probably, or most firms would be able to put a number on some of these services, but can they really fundamentally tell how much these things cost?
I suspect. I suspect not. I suspect that the majority of prices given are based on what they think the market will withstand and what they think is, they can do the job for reasonably. Yeah. So the day of the billable hours seems to be disappearing, and now things are price based, based on scope and assumptions. But the idea of recording time and then asking for more at the end is much, much harder than it used to be. Yeah. So as we go through a job now, it isn't so much about how many hours I've recorded versus, well, it is, but it's about how much time is it costing, how many hours am I spending to do the work, and are there ways that I can do the work faster and smarter, hence the reason why there's an inevitable link with technology and how technology can be used to drive efficiencies in doing the work. And that could be as simple as filing emails in a central file that everybody can get, and file site or similar packages will help people do that. That's sort of not very exciting, but very, very critical solution to automating documents, or AI that can read whatever search information that you're looking for, various tools like that. So it's a question of finding the most efficient way of doing the same job as fast as you can. That's one way of making it cheaper. Another way might be, pushing the work down to a low level where the people who's doing that work are less qualified and less expensive. Yeah. I'm not sure that customers will be thrilled at the idea of that, because when you're paying the money, you want the best service possible. Yeah. As long as it's underwritten by the firm, I suppose that's okay. But it's still very much, in my view, a people business, and so having the right person doing the job is important. Yeah, and it brings us on to tools that can help you through this kind of thing, that can help you analyse this kind of thing. I mean, I know we've met, I think it's Nick from Aperio, who we've met at a couple of the Legal Geek events and things like that. And Aperio provide a cost management solution. They do. Which allows you to delve deep into these kind of things, that allows you to analyse where the costings are in the company, what's costing you the most, where those costs are situated, at the different levels and things like that. And also can be used to allow client access to that kind of information. Yeah. So I think it's tools like that are coming in now that can really allow you to, meet some of these remits, to understand these details, to allow you to give better and clearer pricing that isn't going to come back and bite you. Yeah. I mean, at its simplest, I think what it does is it integrates with the time recording solutions, and we know at least that he's integrated with Carpe Diem in the past, and there are others. And what I think you can do with a program like that is say, this is the budget, and this is the amount of time I've spent against that budget, multiplied by some hourly rate, which means you either will come in under or over. But yes, as you said, giving that access to clients is important for them, and they get to see when things are happening on the files, which immediately sounds scary, but that is a better service for the customer if they want it. So it's a good thing, and it should be encouraged. But you can get much better information out of it. And we mentioned before, we had conversations ourselves before, there's Robert Mowbray, for example. He's I think he's an accountant by background, and he's very much of the view that one should record time against a file, and insofar as it's matter related. So if I have to spend time to achieve an outcome for a client, even if that's at the end of the transaction, I've recorded a certain amount of time, and I need to now understand what took me the longest and where I didn't make. That would be matter related. Now, I don't want to say that he would necessarily say you should definitely be recording that. Whether you should or shouldn't is by the by. The point is, it takes you time to understand where where you've spent that time. So if you can have a solution that enables you to allocate time against tasks that you know you're going to do, and maybe, for example, the future of this might be that your time recording solution says record time against items A, B, and C because you've said you're going to do those. And if the client says, oh, I also now need you to look at something else, you say, actually, item D isn't on the list of things that we said we were going to do, and it's fair that I ask you to pay more for that.
Yeah.
Because scope creep is one of those things that I think a lot of, it's difficult for lawyers because they need to just do the best, and you don't want to be coming back to your client all the time and asking for more money. But at the same time, going back to the builder analogy earlier, you don't say to your builder, can you build me a conservatory now for the same money? Or can you alter the plans and do something different, but I don't want you to charge me anymore?
Yeah.
So you should expect to pay more when the scope changes.
Yeah.
But the earlier you can tell people about the scope changing and that you're asking me to do things outside of scope, the better.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I think what we're saying is, these new rules that are coming in, and there's going to be more of this kind of thing,
yep.
and it's a driving force behind a lot of things that clients want now. There's new legal tech out there which can allow you to get a better handle on this, and potentially, some of this stuff isn't the cool stuff, isn't the AI, analyzing documents, that kind of thing, isn't the chat bots to help you, but it's the fundamental stuff that allows you to provide better information to your client and allows you to provide better information internally as to what these costs are.
Absolutely.
And these solutions are coming out there now. Things like Aperio and other things, integration with time recording solutions, all that kind of stuff that can allow you to internally get a better handle on this kind of information.
Yeah. It feels a little bit like a sort of an old school engineering product line. If you go to Henry Ford days, and everything was measured, and we just haven't done that in the past, or at least the industry hasn't. It's been, we record time, and how much time it takes is what it costs, but that doesn't wash with clients anymore, and so we have to be better. And that's one of the big pushes in technology is let's be better at doing the simple things right.
Yeah, definitely. That's interesting, and I think our discussion on what is out there, what you can use, this kind of boils down into our sort of third item on here as well, which was the Looking Glass report, and this is a report generated by, I've forgotten the name of the company,
Clyde & Co.
Who've produced this report.
So they've said, and I'll just read a couple of statistics from it, more than half of GCs, they actually say 56%, and board members, 64%, feel unprepared to deal with cyber attacks. This goes back to the security stuff we've talked about earlier. Further, investment in appropriate technology is hindered by a lack of funding, with 55% of GCs or general counsels saying they have difficulty in securing a budget. I can attest to this personally from having conversations with in-house people at law firms saying there isn't a budget. They've gone from being an asset at a law firm to a liability on the balance sheet or a cost at a company, and so there's already money spent on them.
Yeah, there's never any budget anywhere. So that's what everyone always tells you for anything.
That's right. So the two key ones are data analytics and AI are the two technologies that have the biggest impact on the organizations, or expected to, but neither is particularly well understood. Well, let's have a bit more of a deeper look at the information. So these are general counsel and board member figures. I'll just read two or three of them. So for data analytics, the report says 46% understand the impact or think it will have an impact, but only 22% have a good understanding of what data analytics is. That's general counsel. Data analytics for board members, 56%, I think it is, 58% perhaps, have a big suggest it will have a big impact, but only 47% have a good understanding of it. For AI, those numbers are 39% in terms of the impact, and 31%, I think, in terms of the understanding for GCs. For board members, it's slightly bigger. 63% suggest have a big impact. 53%, I think it is, having a good understanding. So overall, I think they're saying, well, we expect these two things to have a big impact, but we don't understand them particularly well. But also very interesting, toward the bottom of the list, we'll come onto this in future weeks, I think. Blockchain, again, it's another buzzword, and we will cover it. But I mean, the writing is so small I can't read it. 15%, I think, of GCs say they think it'll have a big impact. Or seemingly all of those people, 15% think they understand it. That's amazing. And 32% of board members think it will have a big impact, and I think the same again, 32% think they understand it. So they all seem to understand blockchain, which is terrific, but they don't think it'll have a big impact.
Yeah, which is really surprising. I mean, a huge amount of the news stories of late and a huge amount of discussion everywhere is related to what a huge impact and what a huge benefit blockchain will be. And yet, as we can see from these figures, that maybe not everyone actually thinks that within the firms and stuff, and wonders whether this can be an impact. And it is telling us there's a lot of talk about blockchain solutions out there, but I'm not sure I've seen actual many blockchain solutions that have come out and been used so far.
No, well, we'll cover some in future shows. We have got some stuff to talk about on that. But no, you're right. I think people are probably still figuring their way out, aren't they, around that topic? There isn't a sort of one-off. If you need a word processor, you go and get Word. If you want a blockchain, where do you go?
And what are you going to use your blockchain for as well?
What are you going to use it for? That's probably a better question. But anyway, maybe it's the low impact of it is based on the fact that so few of them seem to think so few of them understand it. I mean, although they all understand what it is, according to the statistics, when I say that, I mean everybody who thinks it will have an impact understands what it is. Maybe the people who don't understand it, the 85%, therefore don't think it will have a big impact. So actually, almost nobody understands it. I think that's the bottom line.
I know, and I think there's a lot. I think this, to be honest, goes for a lot of these issues as well, from AI to chatbots, smart contracts, blockchain. There's a lot of news about them. There's a lot of commentary about you should be using them, you should be looking at them. But there's a huge amount of ununderstanding about it. People don't know what these things are, don't know what they're going to mean for their firms, what they can be used for, and should they be looking at them. And they're looking for that advice from, reading the news reports and stuff at the moment. Those items in the news are still not giving very much information away of what these things are actually used for.
I think you can go to a blockchain event and ask for a very simple explanation of what blockchain is, or smart contracts, and get back complicated replies, because people who understand them, you probably have to do a lot of work to understand them, and it's difficult sometimes to condense it to its simplest. And if you understand it, having spent a lot of time on it, doesn't necessarily mean your customers are going to understand it and therefore want to be, to use it. And we've talked before, at the beginning of the show, the simpler solutions also quite popular. Why would you get bogged down in something like a blockchain when actually you've got to get your prices transparent, because the SRA say so, and they aren't yet. Well, hopefully they are, but even if they are, you could be much better at delivering the work on budget and finding out where you're spending most of your time and where the profits are being lost. Why would you invest in blockchain when you're busy working things like that out?
Yeah, definitely. And I think these factors that the Clyde & Co report brings out, and this is what we wanted to talk mostly about in the show, is what should people be looking at when they're looking to invest in these technologies? How should people go about this? Where are they going to find this information from? Those kind of issues.
Well, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the people who are out there. I mean, the big firms will have teams dedicated to this, but the small firms won't. So let's think about, the smallish firm thinking, well, how am I going to survive over the next few years? How am I going to put my business together and use technology to make it better? Where do you start? Well, one thing is, what outcome do you want? And let's go a bit deeper than just more profit. What solutions are available? Because we'll come on to this in a bit more detail a bit later in this point, where we're talking about the topic of the show, about the number of solutions. But broadly, they can be put into different categories generally. And again, we mentioned the startup map last week. You can go and have a look and see just how many categories there are of solutions. Yeah. So maybe solution category is something you look at and what the driver is for that category. How do you implement it, and how do you integrate it with what you already have? Of all those things you can pick from, how are you going to do those two things? What's the team going to be that's going to implement it? What does that look like? And then, how do you decide between, I've got 10 problems, I could apply 10 solutions to them, which we've heard described as the sort of whack-a-mole solution or a whack-a-mole approach, where whenever the problem pops up, you hit it with a solution, versus the more unified, singular approach where, I don't know, maybe the functionality isn't quite as deep in the single approach. Maybe it is, but the point is you have one place to go to solve your problems. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's key, and I think one of the things you mentioned there, relating to integrations and things like that, this is a topic that, people don't always think about when they're looking at these new solutions. When you're looking to get a new AI solution that reads contracts and things like that, when you're looking at a new cost analysis solution, one of the things you should be asking yourself is this a solution that can integrate with either existing solutions that I have already on site, or will it integrate nicely with future solutions I might have? So you can imagine that something like, as we said, something like Aperio that we talked about earlier, this is a cost analysis product. You need something like that to be able to integrate with your time recording solution. You need it to integrate with any budgeting software that you have. Maybe your whole sort of enterprise solution where payroll runs through, where all your financials run through. You need these things to talk to each other. And it's, I've been involved in custom solutions for clients throughout various different industries, from private organizations, professional services organizations, local governments, and a huge amount of our job is often integrating with other solutions. And there's often huge difficulties in doing that. You've got, especially nowadays when, as we talked about earlier, when you've got stuff hosted in private clouds, stuff in public clouds, can these all talk to each other? It's something you really need to look at. You can't be blinkered by the shiny new product over there that sits in a public cloud environment, when you need it to talk to something that's in your private cloud environment, which can't access it.
So it could be siloed and unable to get a benefit from it. What is it as simple, do you think, as saying to, suppose again we're sitting in the firm and just trying to decide what solution we go for? Is it as simple as saying to the new startup companies or the tech solutions, what do you integrate with? Or is it more complicated than that?
No, I think it's as simple as that. Okay. You've got to get from these companies what their solution is for integration, how you're able to export and import data into them, and bring up things like where these solutions are hosted, whether it's on a private cloud, whether it's on a public cloud, whether it's internally hosted on premise and stuff. Analyze these things before you go out to tender and have that stuff available. I've been involved in numerous integrations where we've talked about we need to get data from another system somewhere, and you'll often go on site and say, well, that's easy, we've got the integration solutions within this product, we can talk to that other system, and then it flags up, well, actually this system is isolated, it can't talk to the outside world. And then that's not a failing of the solutions in such, it's a difficulty in the IT infrastructure. But these are things you don't think about when you're looking at these things.
Well, what's interesting is we've talked about legal tech and law tech being a new space but growing, and I guess if we to look at and apply the cynical approach to it, of a Silicon Valley approach to it, firms and companies that are startups will traditionally identify the minimum viable product and try and
Yes.
solve the quickest solution. So that could be anything. I mean, there are lots of different potential problems to be solved. So it might be the case that all the startups that you talk to, if you talk to new firms or new startups themselves, when they're talking to law firms, have a relatively limited capacity, if I can call it that, for solving a problem. And maybe they don't integrate with many other things. And so maybe the outcome is, as a lawyer, I have to choose. I have to pick my battles carefully. I want to solve this problem more than that, and that means you've got to understand the problem. Or, is there a way that we can create a single user interface between lots of different solutions? That presumably would rely on some kind of partnership between startup companies. But what you don't want to do, presumably, is have 10 problems identified, and then put 10 solutions on it, because you'll end up with, exhaustion from remembering 10 different passwords.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that, and it's. I think there was a report, sort of June, July last year, from which I think came out from Clifford Chance, where they'd reduced their tech toolkit from sort of 25 solutions down to 3.
Yep.
And that was to allow the fee earners and that to get access to the right tools,
Yep.
But also to not be overloaded by things. And I'm sure that, many people listening and stuff in their organizations, you'll know that, okay, well, it's time to do my timesheets today. I log into the timesheet app to do that. Oh, I now need to actually check what my budgets were. I'll log into another system to check on what the budgets were.
Yep.
I need to get some documents that are stored in another system.
Right.
And many things now have single sign-on and to allow easy access, but you're still always having to go somewhere else, looking around for data.
Which, when you've got to be efficient with your time, is a nuisance.
It's difficult, and what I think it lends to is actually people start to work around those things. You have these amazing systems in place which can do all this stuff. You've got an amazing time recording system, but because your fee earners have difficulty accessing it, or it's just another thing for them to do, they begin logging their time offline, and then end of the week, end of the month is when they all rush in to actually put it online, when there's many solutions where that should be tracked immediately and as it happens,
or automated.
And the same thing for other items. People will just store this stuff in external sources, in their own spreadsheets, in their own document archives, and then they're all uploaded at certain points throughout the day or the week and stuff, when they remember to log into all these other systems. So it's about looking at solutions as a whole, and not just thinking about, like you say, the whack-a-mole approach of we need to fix this problem, we need to fix this problem, and we need to fix this one, and getting a different solution for all of them. Making sure that you can get all these things to talk to each other, so that your fee earners and your staff have a unified place to go to, and something that's easy for them to use. You may end up with something that's potentially not as functionally rich, but people begin to adopt it, people begin to use it more.
Presumably that could just be as simple as just a sign-in page when you sign in the morning. If you have those different tools you have to use every day, you can have a portal with, this is where you sign into the solutions that you need, and then that portal, there is your time recording, your budgeting, your accounts, wherever you file your documents. You could have that. Yeah,
and we've seen, looking at other solutions, other time recording solutions and things like that, which have a well-presented API layer with them. Those kind of things you can integrate into your own system. You don't have to use the front end of the timesheet recording app. You can build your own in your own portal. And although there's potentially significant IT spend there, there's also potential that if you're already using a system which has good API access, has good integration access, that another solution provider you're working with will be able to integrate with that for you. And it's allowing your people just to have one point of access to things.
Yeah. I wonder as well whether it's worth just a final point on this, saying that if you've identified 10 problems, maybe it's worth solving 10% of each problem rather than with one solution, rather than trying to solve 100% of all the problems, if that makes sense, or 100% of one problem. I mean, if I had a choice, and I would make this choice based on what we I've talked about before, of saying I have budget to resolve one problem or 10% of 10 problems, and I realize it won't be that neat, but for the sake of argument, let's say that it was, I would solve the 10% of the 10 problems, because that with one platform, because that one platform will grow to be a better solution in the future. And your analogy, I think, in the past has been, what do you use Word or, let's say, Excel for?
Excel's normally used by everyone for everything you can imagine.
I use Excel for, in my professional work, completion statements and very, very simple arithmetic. In my personal life, I use it for shopping lists and reminders. I don't use it for graphs. I don't use it for all the fantastic data stuff that it can do. I don't actually use any of the other tools that it has because I don't need to. So there is a product. And if I had problems around numbers and data, I have a fully working solution, which I only use. I only scratch the surface of its use. I only use 10% of Excel, if that, and then the same is true for Word. I mean, Word does a lot of things that I don't use. So, you're better off, in my view, using a platform which will give you what you need to make significant inroads in all your problems, rather than just isolate one problem and solve it and leave you with 9 problems.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is an aspect that, startups can seize on, these kind of things, bringing these simpler solutions in. I mean, we can look at some of the heavyweights in the industry, something like Contract Express, for example, a hugely powerful suite of tools for templating out your documents so you can have effectively one document to rule them all. Now, the problem with something like that is, yes, it's hugely powerful, it can do all these things, but with that comes complication. And therefore, if you're looking to do some sort of document automation, you may look at Contract Express. And the unfortunate thing is, a lot of people go down the rabbit hole of, let's try and use as much of this as possible, and let's generate one document to cover all aspects of something, of a particular area. And what you end up with is that the implementation of something that takes 6 months, a year or so to get that initial template out, because it's so complicated. Now, if you'd have decided to scale back that, if you'd have used 10% of the functionality of this product, you could potentially have got up and running and been using it. Look at instead of having one document to rule them all, you maybe have 2 documents. So there's a decision made by the person entering or who's going to be filling this in initially. They go one of 2 routes. They make that first decision, rather than that happening in a single big document. Some of it's gone back on to the person deciding what they want to use. And this kind of thing leads to simpler document automation, whereby, no, you're not giving the same functionality as Contract Express, but you're giving something that you can jump into, you can get going on it now, and something that can be built on in the future.
Presumably one of the complications will be you have to have a specialist who knows the product. It needn't necessarily be an IT person or a lawyer. It could be anybody, as long as they know that product. But it's unlikely that you're going to have everybody understanding that product. Now, a lot of people in firms will be working in, they won't necessarily be that well integrated with their support people. And so maybe they are working with clients and the client says, I really need you to make these changes to my precedents and they've got to be done quickly, but they're a frequent changer, or you're trying to win new clients all the time and you're constantly having a new flow of clients, because some clients stay and some clients go, so how do you decide whether you invest the time in getting their documents onto a Contract Express or similar? The other thing that strikes me about that platform and those types of platforms, we've looked at them and others, are how long it takes to sort out the simplest of the problems. So, for example, if I want to, they're great at saying include these clauses and exclude these clauses where certain boxes are ticked. But let's take a document that is signed by an individual. That's one way of signing, usually in front of a witness. If it's a company, the company could sign in lots of ways. It could be a seal, unlikely nowadays, but two directors, director and secretary, a single director in front of a witness. Could be an overseas company. Could also be a charity. All of those has got parameters. Yeah. The coding, or whatever you would call it, that would require the work that would be required to get all of those eventualities in for those two things. And that doesn't include LLPs and any other entity that we could include. That's a lot of work to get all those different potential parameters, I suspect. And is it any faster than just like highlighting the ones that you don't want and clicking the delete key? I don't think it is, personally.
No. And I mean, it's potentially less prone to error, but again, is that a valid time saving that you've got? You've reduced the errors, but you've taken the time to actually get that template in place. Has taken months and years of work, which has been a cost to the organisation. Does that cost outweigh you getting someone to double check the work? You don't know. And like we say, I think these are areas that new legal tech startups are key to look into. Yes, there are these heavyweights out there already, providing these long established solutions, which are fantastic for doing what you want. They're battle proven, they work, they're already out there being used by people. But I think there are niches where startups can come in and offer simpler, not so much simpler solutions, but easier to use solutions. You can ask why some of these existing firms don't do that themselves, and it's normally legacy.
It feels a little bit like being in the 80s and then people telling you can't go wrong investing in IBM, and all of a sudden Microsoft has come along, you've missed out, and so you could be wrong investing in IBM. Maybe the same is true. You can't go wrong investing in Contract Express. Maybe that's true, but I don't know what use that is. Once, for example, you've used it and you've exploited its tremendous power to produce a suite of documents and multiple suites of documents, what use is it to you after that? Can you extract the information from it? Maybe, but does it integrate with everything else that you might be wanting to use, your time recording solution and so on? And it unlikely, because does it need to? Maybe not. But as and when you get into the wider scheme of things that we talked about earlier, and this cost transparency and the idea of breaking down every job into its component parts and recording your time against the component parts of a transaction, the documents and the information that goes into them, that's a separate item of time that could be recorded. And so if those platforms were fully integrated, you'd have a much better set of data to run your business on.
So I think that's kind of key to what we've been looking at here is, if you're looking to procure these solutions, if you're looking to go out to market and say, okay, what is there out there for me to use? Is it an AI solution? Is it a blockchain solution? Is it any of these things? Before you take that step and decide, okay, I'm going to get an AI solution, take a step back and look at, a holistic approach of the organization. How can these things fit together, and what, are there things out there which will be quicker and easier for me to implement that I can get the benefits from now, rather than in 6 months, rather than in a year. And there's a huge amount of new products being created by startups. Don't be afraid of looking at those kind of things. These new startups can be worked with. They're much quicker and dynamic to change things and adapt to new situations. Work with them to build these products.
Absolutely. You'd be able to have the influence, I suspect, on a lot of the direction in which they're built. I mean, they need the information too to be able to shape their product in the right way.
Yeah.
So there's only one way to get it. We talked about information last time for AI solutions. You know, they need the information, and if you can provide it to them, it's a benefit to them and to you if they build you the solution that works best for you. But it's got to be a team effort because, or at least, we talked about what the team might look like that goes out and acquires the technology. Well, inevitably it's going to be partner-led because, well, it's going to be partner-led, or for the large firms, they're going to have specialist teams. But for the mid-tier and smaller firms, it will be partner-led because they're the ones with the budgets in mind. They're the ones, the decision makers. Yeah. Are they necessarily the right people to be looking at the solutions? Are they necessarily going to be the people with the detailed knowledge of what's available in the latest stuff? Maybe not. And are they necessarily the right people to know how the job is currently done? Because partners should be delegating work, you would think, to a large degree. Are they necessarily the right people that know how the work is done? Maybe not. So the team probably should comprise more than just partner level. It needs to include people who are at the cold face, but also people who know how the technology works. And that may not be the lawyers.
No, definitely. No, it's an interesting topic, and I think it's definitely something that we'll return to in the future. Yeah. So I think we've hit the 15-minute mark, so I think we've got to start wrapping up. A couple of things we just wanted to keep you aware of. Primarily, the Legalex event in London is happening in Thursday this week, I believe.
Thursday, it's the 27th and 28th, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Wednesday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Lots of interesting speakers there. Interestingly, Richard Williams of the SRA is going to be there talking about the SRA transparency rules. So,
which is what we talked about earlier.
We talked about that. If anybody actually has any questions, go along and ask him. There are lots of other people there. Richard Tromans of Artificial Lawyer and Tromans Consulting, talking about getting real about legal AI and automation. So that will cover a lot
more AI stuff like we've discussed before.
Yeah, then we've also got another interesting one. This is at the Google campus, 25th of April, 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. This is Startup Law, an Introduction to Startup Law by Buckworth, which is a law firm that's helping startups get started. Which is great. I haven't been to their presentations before, but I have been to other firms who have done that. Those sessions are really popular, surprisingly popular, and funnily enough, the most interesting topic, I mean, they will be talking, just to give you a sort of brief list of the things they say they're going to cover: relevant taxes and how to register for them, intellectual property rights, how you can protect them, managing risk, data protection, GDPR, lots of things in there. The tax stuff seems to be really important to people. There must be a lot of people out there wanting to have companies in the Cayman Islands or elsewhere. I don't know they'll be able to help anybody with that, but maybe they can. But also, I suspect if there are startups out there interested in going along to that, 25th of April, if you're not making any money, there's no point worrying about where your tax is, where you should be paying your tax.
Maybe worry about that afterwards, when the checks start coming in.
That's right, yeah.
So as always, we're going to have all of the links and the ability to access any of this stuff in the description for the video and for the actual audio podcast as well. So if you want to look into anything more in detail, check the description, click on the links, and definitely check out the things we talked about, and like and subscribe to their areas. As we said before, you can find this podcast, the video version, on YouTube. There's a Panache Software channel there. It's available now on Spotify and on the Apple Podcast app. And if you like what you hear, if you want to get involved with us, potentially get earlier access to some of the content, then we also have a Patreon, which is patreon.com/Panache Software. Have a look at that and support us if you can.
And we want questions and feedback, and you can email us directly, panachecast@panachesoftware.com. Very interested in feedback, and in particular topics that you want us to cover.
Yeah, definitely.
Topics you don't want us to cover. Anybody from LegalTech startups that we've either mentioned or not, or who want to get their name and brand out there, then let us know and get in touch. It's panachecast@panachesoftware.com.
That's great. And we'll be here again at the same time next week.
Okay. See you then.
Excellent. See you then. Thanks then.
Bye.
Bye.